turns out that this is referring to the Uttarayana happening in the Dhanishta Nakshatra. So Uttarayana happening in the Dhanishta Nakshatra, winter solstice point, this is Dhanishta and it's happening over there, happened at a certain point in the past that is no longer true. Why is it not true? Because the earth, in addition to the rotation, in addition to the revolution, is also doing one more thing. That one more thing is where it is pointing to in the sky, that is slowly tracing a path like my finger is showing, taking about 26,000 years to complete one cycle. This is called a cycle of precession. Precession is happening because of the gravitational action of the sun, moon, and to some extent Jupiter and Venus also. So Earth is precessing, and the precessing takes that much of time. Because Earth is precessing, what it is pointing to has changed. Do you see in 1400 BCE, Dhruva is no longer here. Dhruva has changed, it is no longer over here. So because of this astronomical clock, we can work backwards in time precisely and tell when that observation was true. In this case, it is 1440 BCE. There is also a text we have called Shatapatha Brahmana, written by Rishi Yajnavalkya. Over there, he says a particular cryptic statement. He tells a Vedic practitioner several things. How do you conduct your Vedic ritual? How do you conduct your altar? He also says, how do you find the east direction? Finding the east direction was very important for auspiciousness of the Vedic ritual. For example, if Agni Bhagavan is coming over there, you can't do Namaste over here, can't Namaskar. That's very disrespectful. You have to point to where your guest is coming to do that. In addition to that, if somebody says, where is the east direction, you just can't say where the sun is rising. Well, to some extent that is true, but the point is, we know Uttarayana is happening, and we know Dakshinayana is happening from 23.3 degrees to minus 23.3 latitude. That is the variation of the sun in the sky. So where is east direction? Is it here, 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 and here? So we don't know, right? So Yajnavalkya says, Kritika does not move from the east direction. Therefore, you may light your Vedic fire under Kritika. This is what he has written in Shatapatha Brahmana. Such a statement would have been true when Kritika was in the celestial equator. Kritika was in the celestial equator in 2982 BCE. That would have led to the celestial heliacal rising of Kritika. So the Vedic practitioner would have gotten up early in the morning before dawn, when it is still dark, had a ritual bath, come outside when it is dark, seen where Kritika is. Kritika would be right there in the sky, over the horizon. Half an hour later, the sun also rises in the same place. Kritika is washed out, but he's got a straight line. Kritika is there, sun is there. I'll put my altar here and start the fire under Kritika. So because of that, we know Shatapatha Brahmana was written in 2982 BC. Very staggering amount of time. We have an ancient epoch encoded in the text. We have the Puranas talked about Kali Yuga, Aryabhatta, Surya Siddhanta referred to that, Pulisa Siddhanta, Brahmagupta, Al-Baruni. Temple in Karnataka refers to that. Lee Gentle was an astronomer from France who came along with the invasion of Tamil Nadu by the French. And he found some pundits over there who were referring to some tables, and he took those tables from them and he called them the tables of Trivallur. He couldn't make sense out of it. So he sent it off to his buddy. His buddy was a friend in Italy called Cassini. Cassini was a mathematician, and he asked Cassini to analyze that. Cassini said, it appears to be referring to something on midnight of February 18th, 3102 BCE. This is later validated by other Britishers, Playfair, Bentley, Colebrook, Burgess. They referred to the Surya Siddhanta, and they also referred to this. It turns out to be a rare conjunction of planets, sun, moon, the Revati Nakshatra, and I simulated that in the planetarium software. So here is the sun over here, and you have the moon over here. You got Jupiter, and you have got Venus here. Revati Nakshatra is over here. Mars, Mangala is over here. Buddha, Mercury is here. Shani, there is Saturn is over there. They're all clustered in this particular place. Such a clustering has not happened for more than 26,000 years. So you can work back fairly precisely and say, in Revati Nakshatra, it is a clustering. It happened in February 18, 3102 BCE. And even today, devout Hindus, when they begin their prayers, they are referring to this epoch. They refer to this epoch of Kali Yuga, starting from this point onwards and doing it. Amazing, staggering amount of time encoded in our text. In Rig Veda, we have a story of Aditi. Aditi, along with the co-sister Diti and the Rishi Kashyapa, they are the ones who gave rise to the Adityas, Rudras, and Vasus. So in Bhagavad Gita, we are told about Uttarayana as the path of the Devas, Dakshinayana as the path of the Daityas. Instinctively, it tells us that a mother's got to be equidistant from all her sons. She can't be partial to some and not to others. So we get the feeling that Aditi has got something to do with the equinox position. She's also associated with the Punarvashu Nakshatra. And so it turns out that, let me get this to work. Not very sure why it is not advancing. Yes. So it turns out that Balagangadhar Tilak and K.D. Abhyankar, they analyze this phenomena and they said it refers to the vernal equinox at Punarvashu Nakshatra. And their analysis shows that it was for a staggering 6000 BCE is when that particular verse in Rig Veda is referring to this particular episode. There is also the story of Ashwinis in the Rig Veda. All of us know the story of Sanjana. Sanjana, along with Surya, gave rise to the Ashwini twins, but sun was very, very hot for her. So what did she do? She left her shadow Chaya in her place and told Chaya, you take care of my children. And she abandoned her husband and she went away to the coolest region. His son is in the northernmost point, she's in the southernmost point, as far away as she can get from him. That's where she was. Well, pretty soon Surya discovers a deception and he knows that Sanjana has taken the form of a horse and gone to the southern regions. So he also goes to the southern region in search of her. So if sun is in the southern region, what would have been in India? It would have been winter solstice. Winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. That is the astronomical implication from this story. Ashwinis are mentioned in many, many verses in the Rig Veda, but then Abhyankar and Lokamanya Tilak point out a particular episode where they say that Ashwinis appear at dawn for their share of sacrifice. They point out to that verse. Ashwinis appear at dawn for their share of the Vedic ritual sacrifice. So they say that refers to a heliacal rising of Ashwini. That would have been the winter solstice at Ashwini Nakshatra, and that era is 7200 BCE. Again, not true today because of precision. Precision has moved away, and that's why we can date it fairly precisely over there. There is Swati, is one of the nakshatras that is called Arcturus. And this is referred to in Surya Siddhanta in this particular book by Anil Narayan, History of Indian Astronomy. So stars are also moving with respect to us, but we don't normally see stars moving in the sky because they're so far away. It turns out that when a star is moving, it is moving in 3 dimensions: radial velocity, spatial velocity, and transverse velocity. We can't see any of those. It's an engineering concept. What we can see is if this is a reference line from the sun, if I'm observing it, this star, when it is moving, it is forming an angle. And this angle is what we are referring to as a proper motion angle. So that's what we can refer from the Earth, right? That's what we can do. It turns out that today Swati is one of the fastest stars in proper motion. Scientists have measured it at 2 arc seconds in a year. That is how fast Swati is moving in the sky. And if you want to find Swati, you go and find Saptarishi. The tail of Saptarishi points to Swati. It's a red giant in the sky. So the Greeks had referred to Swati. So the Greek position of Swati is off by 1 degree. That 1 degree you can work with 2 arc seconds and figure out it's 1800 years old, the Greek observation. Surya Siddhanta also makes a measurement of Swati. And the measurement of Surya Siddhanta is off by 6 degrees compared to today. The implication of that is you take 6 and multiply it by 60, convert it to minutes, multiplied by 60, convert it to seconds, divided by 2 arc seconds, you get 10,800 years. So the person who wrote the position of Swati in Surya Siddhanta made that observation in 8000 BCE. Very, very staggering amount of time. And this is brought out by Anil Narayan in this particular book, and the references and other things are here. So the antiquity roundup is that human presence in India for at least 2 million years ago, we found artifacts in various time periods. And I've shown how with astronomy you can date various things in the text and call out very, very ancient epochs. I'd like to use that to rebut the Aryan invasion theory model, one aspect of it at least. So we are told by this gentleman over here that after Aryan invasion theory, all the Sanskrit works written in India after these so-called Aryans came to India, and he proposed a Chandas period, 1200 BC to 1000 BC, where the earliest books of Rig Veda were written, Mantra period, remaining books of Rig Veda, Brahmana period, Sama, Yajur, Aranikas, Upanishads, Sutra period, when the Vedangas and grammar, astronomy, Jyotisha, all this were written in this time frame. However, I have shown to you using astronomy that Vedanga Jyotisha is talking about winter solstice in Dhanishta Nakshatra. That's working out to 1440 BCE. Where is that, and where is the Sutra period Brahmana over here at 600 BCE? We talked about Kritika in Shatapatha Brahmana. Kritika never moves in the east direction, and that one comes out of 2982 BC. Where is this Brahmana period and where is this Brahmana period? Such a big error over here. We talked about Rig Veda, these two episodes on Rig Veda. Where is that? Where is the Chandas period proposed by Max Muller? Very, very clearly you can see that Max Muller's dates are just pulled out of a hat. There is no reason for any of these things to be true. If you take the internal evidence of the Indic texts, we can show that this date and periodization is bogus. Well, somebody went to Max Muller and asked him at a conference in Europe, Mr. Max Muller, is all of Indian chronology to be held hostage to the Christian chronology model? This man got so upset by that question, he wrote an entire book on that, an ancient Hindu astronomy and chronology. And over here, he basically criticized all of Indian astronomy, said it's all not reliable. And he only accepted Colebrook's date for Vedanga Jyotisha because that is after Aryan invasion theory. That is why towards the end of his career, he said, what does it matter if the Vedas were written in 1000 BC or 3000 BC? He said, wisdom of the Vedas remains. It is not an admission of a mature person. It is not the admission of somebody who's found knowledge and is making a profound statement. It is a statement of a defeated person who's been attacked by people from all sides saying that your theory is all bogus. That is the statement, that is the situation with them. Unfortunately, these views are loosely flaunted even today by some scholars that talk about Indian astronomy being unreliable and they can't use it. Our country has honored him with a flag, with a stamp. We also honored him with Max Muller Bhavans everywhere, and in New Delhi, a major road is named after him. For some reason, we love these guys who kill us. So genetics is the next area that I wanted to talk to you about, but I don't think there's time to go in detail, so I'll just skim through this whole section. There's a lot of noise today about ancestry genetics. The question is, can the measurements of the mutations that you and I are carrying, if we take a sufficiently large number of these mutations, and what are these mutations? These mutations that you and I carry are from the maternal side, paternal side, going back several thousands of years. If we take a sum total of all of these things and do some analysis, can it tell the story of human migration? That is the idea behind ancestral migration DNA. So people are using Y chromosomal research, maternal mitochondrial DNA research, and genome-wide research to do all of these analysis. And I have problems with this, and I've talked about this at length in my various talks. I will not go in detail over here. This downward arrow shows my lack of confidence. There are three major things people do. The presence or absence of a genetic marker. If somebody comes and says, I'm carrying a certain marker, and I say, this gentleman from the audience is not carrying this marker, that is a fact. We can measure it and say, yes, I have it, he doesn't have it, can't do much about it. However, if I come and say, in this room, 30% of you are carrying a genetic marker of something, and therefore I'm saying all of Hyderabad, 30% of the people carry this marker. That is a spurious allegation, because I cannot make such claims based on the data that I have, neither can I talk about direction of genetic flow. Finally, if somebody says that in this room, 20% of your DNA is from some Central Asian ancestor who lived 4,000 years ago, that is utterly bogus based on the mathematical methods that people use. And we can call out problems with models, methodology, data, samples, and claims. And my bottom line is, I have concerns with methodology due to which the results cannot be global. I'm okay the researchers come and say, in the context of my narrow data, in the context of the narrow assumptions I've made, here is a modest claim that I can put forward. You cannot go around saying, I now know how caste system came into India. I know who are the Indians, 1.3 billion people. I have a story about them. That is impossible using the data that you're carrying, and that is my concern over here. I'm not going to read all these things. The bottom line is, just because a mathematical genetics model converged, it does not confer correctness. To give an idea, supposing you're all in this auditorium over here, and you want to go to, let's say, the Hyderabad airport. So you go to your Google map and say, how do I go from here to Hyderabad airport? Google map will tell you can go by this route, you can go by this route, you can go by this route, there's an accident here, this will take 40 minutes, that will take 1 hour, and so on and so forth. Question is, just because you went on one particular road does not make it correct. So that is the problem with ancestry estimation. There are multiple answers. There are multiple answers. Just because you favored one particular answer, and then you say, because I went on that route, I'm seeing that such a constraint is there, such a constraint is there, such a constraint is there. That is not true. If you're taking a different path, the constraints would have been different. That is the bottom line. So it's a difficult concept to understand unless you work on the mathematics of this. But bottom line, just because you got convergence, it does not confer correctness. And I've given some examples to show some of the issues of the studies. Here is a paper that came out in 2006 that shows a Y haplogroup distribution for Indo-Aryan studies. So they say most of the Indians have got 4 major types of mutations: the L, R1A, J2, and H. And here are the concentrations found in India for these various haplogroups. And R1A is the one they say came from Central Asia. They say the maximum concentration is Central Asia, and from there it came to India. However, in this map, you see the maximum concentration is in UP, and in Central Asia, the concentration is not much at all. Here's one more paper that came out in 2018 that shows North India, East India, West India, South India, the same R1A, H, L markers, and the size of the sets. What you see is the size of the pie chart has changed completely. Compared to the previous study, the size over here has, compared to this, the size here has changed. And I ask, what changed? What changed between 2006 to 2018 so that your numbers have gone all over the place? This is a red flag. It's a red flag because 2 different studies are showing you 2 different results entirely. Question comes, is the model wrong? Is the data wrong? Is the claims wrong? You understand the huge list that I talked about? That is what we need to question over here. So there are multiple opinions on where R1A came from. If you look from Bashu in 2003 all the way to Thangaraj, who works in Hyderabad in CCMB in 2010, these various peoples on the origin of R1A, say Central Asia, Southern Asia, Central Asia, North India, you see there is no consensus even among scientists to say where did this come from. Again, a red flag over there. Here is a superstar professor called David Reich. He says Central Asians and Indians are related through this mutation called R1A Z93, and they have a most recent common ancestor 4,000 years ago. Another study by a French professor says Central Asians and Indians are related by R1A Z93, the most common recent ancestors 15,000 years ago. So 2 different studies giving you entirely different timelines. One person is saying 4,000 years, another person is saying your common ancestor is 15,000 years ago. So who are you going to believe? Well, people in this case are going with David Reich because he's from Harvard Medical School. So pedigree is winning over any other reasoning that you might do over here. But there's no reason for pedigree to win. The question is there are red flags. The red flags need to be investigated. So in 2018, this is what David Reich had proposed. He said that 7000 BCE, a group of Iranian pastoral farmers had come into India and they formed mixed in the Indian population and the ancestral South Indian and so on. Then 4,000 years ago, these Aryans supposedly invaded India and they formed the ancestral North Indians and ancestral South Indians. And today we are a mix of these 2. This was his claim. And at that point, I had contested this. I said that throughout the Indian literature, you find the Vedas, Puranas talk about Anu and the Drihyu who migrate out of India. And I said that the Bhagavad Purana, Vishnu Purana, Vayu Purana, Brahmanda Purana, Matsya Purana, Rig Veda, all of them are talking about migrations of Anu and the Drihyu. And I said, are all these internal sources falsified? Are they all rubbish? Were our ancestors writing rubbish references over there? It is there in our text. Deal with it. And what do we do with that data? If that data does not show in your DNA results, a flag has gone up for me. There's a problem over there. So when they talk about into India, and they didn't talk about this, I said, I have a problem with this. Drying up of Saraswati in 1900 BCE resulted in outward migration, the Hittites, Mitannis, and so on. It doesn't talk about that either. Well, in 2019, the same people came out with a paper in September 2019 where they retracted this particular one. What changed is, I had criticized in 2018, I said, what will happen if you take a few pieces of data out of your result? Take these pieces of data out and put some other data in and tell me, are you going to converge to the same result? That's sensitivity. Any decent engineer would do sensitivity analysis to find out how critically am I dependent on a piece of data. And I suggested that if you take this out, you're going to find your model converge differently. Exactly what they did. They found 11 skeletons in a place in Iran, ancient skeletons, and they added it to the study. The minute they added the Iranian skeletons to the study, it immediately invalidated their own earlier converged results saying there is no pastoral influence into India from Iran. However, they're still sticking to this Aryan invasion coming from Central Asia in this time frame. In India, you have Vasant Shinde, Neeraj Rai, and others who published the same paper. So what does their paper say? There is this Indus Valley civilization climb, which has got a common ancestor about 10,000 BCE. And from here, later on, you got the Iranian hunter-gatherer and so on up to Anatolian farmers. So this is the latest research. They have not retracted on Aryan invasion theory. The only thing they are saying is the Harappa people are indigenous. That is the only result that is claimed by these people. So my rebuttal, I'm not going to read all these things. Results cannot be globalized. There are many, many issues with today's genetic results. If you analyze the mathematics, the bottom line that comes out of that is your results have to be narrow. You cannot make very broad, bombastic results. So question comes, what caused the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization? So long I've been trying to tell you there's no Aryan invasion theory. If there's no Aryan invasion theory, then how did Harappa collapse? How did Mohenjo-daro collapse? And so on. This paper in Nature says a 200-year drought doomed the Indus Valley civilization. Monsoon hiatus that began 4,200 years ago, that is what caused the collapse. So I always ask people to have this mental picture. Today's India, if monsoon fails even for 1 year, we have a lot of poor farmers who can't afford to repay their loans and they're going to commit suicide and all those kind of things. If the monsoon fails in India for 5 years, there's going to be catastrophe in India. God help us. There's going to be famine. There's going to be widespread GDP is going to fall. Cities will get overfilled with people trying to look for jobs, all kinds of issues. Can you imagine 200 years of drought? 200 years of monsoon failure. Just imagine that. All the southern Indian rivers would have been fed by monsoons. If monsoons had failed for 200 years, southern India would have been a dust bowl. It is not surprising to me that they found Indian DNA in Australia 4,000 years ago that coincided with these droughts. People are going out of India to various parts of the world. That is what was going on. Not at all surprising to me. So anyway, move on from that. I'd like to quickly show you evidence that does not fit with the Aryan invasion theory. One of them is the river Saraswati. There's a recent paper that came out in, I think this is November 2019 by Anirban Chatterjee. That bottom line is they analyzed the white mica sands that are typical of glacier-fed Himalayan rivers. They found such sand layers 3 to 10 meters below the surface of the modern Ghaggar in a stretch of 300 kilometers up to the Pakistan border. And this is a powerful indicator of a river in the past. So the issue is NCERT textbooks don't even talk about the Saraswati River. They don't mention it by the name. Go to your house if you have children studying the 10th grade or 12th grade. See if the NCERT textbooks talk about Saraswati. They don't. They call it a mythical river. Saraswati is talking about a flowing river, rather Rig Veda is talking about a flowing river from the Himalayas to the oceans, and that cannot have been possible in the time frame that they are talking about. The time frame they're talking about is Aryan invasion theory, 1500 BC, Chandas period, 1200 BCE. In 1200 BC, the river had dried up, according to this research. River had dried up almost 4,500 years ago. So how could the Rig Veda be talking about a flowing Saraswati if it is already dried up? That is why they call it a mythical river. However, that mythical river, scientists today are saying there's nothing mythical about this. This very much exists and we can see it. This is B.B. Lal, one of India's famous archaeologists. So he worked his entire life on Harappa and other places, and he came with the idea that there's a continuity of civilization. He points out the Pashupati seal, the very famous Pashupati seal, the swastika symbol. He points out terracotta figurines where the women figurine even show the signs of sindoor. Even today, some married women in India wear the sindoor symbol, and this is there in some of the terracotta figurines. He points out this figurine that is showing the Namaste pose. Namaste is a deeply Vedantic concept that says, Narayana in me is bowing to the Narayana in you. It's an acknowledgement of that. That is Namaste. What is that doing in Harappa if Harappa is not Vedantic? Then S.R. Rao found Kalibangan, the Shivalinga, and Yoga Asana position, several terracotta figurines showing Yoga Asana position. So based upon these things, he brings in the idea there is no such thing as Harappa period, followed later on by Vedic period. Rather, there is a continuity of ideas and there is no periodization. That's what he's saying. We are told that iron was brought to India by the Aryans in 1500 BCE in these papers, for example. However, they found in Telangana, iron was found in 2200 BCE. And this paper says Professor K.P. Rao, who worked in artifacts, he found irons, blades, and knives. He tested it in Hyderabad in this particular lab with this particular technique, and this is the date they're given. So this disproves the idea that Aryans brought iron into India. Everybody knows about Sanauli in India by now. Sanauli is a place when UP they found chariot pit burials and so on. Initially, they said that, for example, Michael Witzel criticized this, saying these are not horse-driven chariots, these are donkey-driven and other such ridiculous assertions. However, if you read a particular video, there's a video called Warriors of Sanauli on YouTube. Make a note of that, Warriors of Sanauli on YouTube. It's a recent video by the chief archaeologist where he's talking about all the X-ray studies and other things they've done on these specimens. He categorically emphasizes that these are horse-bound chariots. He also says he recovered a horsewhip. So that is there in that video called Warriors of Sanauli. So this invalidates the idea that Aryans brought horse and iron to India. There's an interesting paper that came out in Current Science, May 2018, in Institute of Paleosciences in Lucknow. This talks about paddy that was grown in the Lahura Deva Lake approximately 9,000 years ago. And this invalidates the idea that agriculture was invented in Turkey in 7000 BCE and spread to India. This is another interesting paper in Genome Biology in 2007. The researcher over here wanted to find out where is the ancestor for the common house mice, the simple house mice that we found. And his genomic studies found the ancestor of the common house mice is in India. And he said it is from India they went to Madagascar, to Northern Africa, to Europe, to China, to Southeast Asia. Everywhere this house mice went out of India to these places. And he also said, where is the ancestor? How old is that ancestor? That ancestor turned out to be 12,000 years ago. That is the ancestor. Why is that relevant? We know that today if you store paddy in a storeroom, mice are going to come over there. And as paddy as a technology is exported to the rest of the world, mice are going to follow along. So these two papers, this one and this one taken together, tell a very, very powerful story that even paddy was grown in India, is an out of India expansion of even paddy, and mice also are trying to show, the genome of mice is showing that. This is a paper that came out in July 2019. This is a very, very familiar humped bull of India called Zebu. And they found Zebu in Mitanni Hittite lands, again, northern Turkey and, northern Iraq and Turkey, that area. So this paper says that approximately 4,000 years ago, suddenly the Bos Indicus, the samples went up tremendously in terms of the archaeological record, genetic record, and every such thing. And they say this came from the Indus Valley about 4.2 thousand years ago. Why is this important? Because the Zebu bull is a drought-resistant animal. It can withstand, it's adapted to Indian conditions with very little water, hot sun, and so on. It is a prized possession. Cattle in other parts of the world were not that resistant to drought. So when the drought happened in India, people appear to have gone out of India and settled in the Fertile Crescent, where Tigris River, Euphrates River, and so on is. This is an Akkadian seal that shows the long-horned Indian bull. This is in a museum in France. I didn't make much sense out of this artifact. I knew about its existence, but I had no idea why is it relevant. When this paper came out, I suddenly was able to put one and one together and say, that is why. It is very, very important in that particular culture when Indian bulls came and rescued their own civilizational issues. So with that, I'm coming to almost to the end of my talk. So I wanted to give you very, very quickly address the allegations that Indians got all their knowledge from the Babylonians and Greeks and so on. Wanted to show that ancient Indian philosophical systems talk about a great many number of knowledge systems. For example, we had the Nyaya school, Akshapada Gautama was one of the rishis, where one-line statement, all knowledge is not intrinsically valid, most knowledge is not valid unless proven, truth exists whether the human beings know it or not. Vaisheshika by Rishi Kannada works on perception inference, Samkhya, systematic enumeration, rational examination, Rishi Kapila. Purva Mimamsa, Kumarila Bhatta worked on reflection, consideration, profound thought, investigation, examination, and discussion. Uttara Mimamsa, Vedanta, a lot of these things. Why do I say these things? Because most people say it is the British who brought this superstitious continent to a rational way of thinking. They say that we were all superstitious bunch. It's only the British who came and taught us how to be logical and so on. I like to point out that even today as a scientist, when I'm investigating an issue, the first thing I do is I make a systematic enumeration of all the facts known in that particular case and go through a rational examination. Then I go through a process of reflection, consideration, profound thought, investigation, maybe in the lab, examination, discuss with colleagues, and so on and so forth. Then I get an idea, this is what this is all about. And I write a thesis or whatever on that. So even today, we subconsciously use the methods of our rishis. So I also put over here means of knowledge, pramana, to show that in ancient India, all the sampradayas only differed in terms of what was a valid means of knowledge. For example, today if I'm writing my thesis, a PhD thesis, let's say in electrical engineering, I go to the lab or go to the library and take up the IEEE journal and I say, this MIT professor in 1995, he published a theorem. That theorem is very important for me. Therefore, I'll say reference number 1. This professor proved that, therefore I'm writing my thesis based on that. On the Shabda Pramana of that particular professor, I'm writing my thesis. That's the methodology we follow today. In ancient India, we had many things: perception, inference, comparison, postulation, negative proof, as well as Shabda Pramana. All of these things were seen as ways to acquire knowledge. Each sampradaya only differed from what was a valid means to accept knowledge. Charvakas, for example, said only perception. If I can see it, that is true. I reject the Vedas and other such things. Buddhism said only perception and inference, nothing else is valid. So it is just like today, if you refer to Wikipedia as a reference for your PhD thesis, we'll say, no, that's not valid. You can't use Wikipedia. So things of that nature, what is valid and what is invalid. So Advaita, by the time you count Advaita, a lot of things are admitted. So I show this as a hermeneutics or the epistemology of Indian knowledge systems to show that it is not the British who brought a rational way of thinking to India. This is very, very endemic to our systems. I think I'm running out of time, so I will very, very quickly, give me 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay. So I wanted to talk to you about the roots of medicine. I talked first about the means of knowledge. I tried to show there is a bedrock of learning in this country for the longest time. Then I'd like to show to you the roots of medicine. I have a talk on this, so please take a look at Antiquity of Indian Medical Systems in my name. I talk about these things. Roots of mathematics. A whole lot of mathematics finds its way from India, and I'd like to talk to you about that. Roots of music. Most people are conditioned to thinking that music arose independently in India, in China, and in ancient Greece. However, this is a false assertion. Even if you take a raga like Shankarabharanam, and I say that, sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, if I say that, and if I say that, do re mi fa sol la ti do, how is it that the spacing between the notes are exactly the same in various cultures? Is there something psychological or psychosomatic in these things that we converge to the exact differences in frequencies between these notes? That is a question that we need to ask as thinking people. And we say, no, there has to be a common source for these. And the common source I shows in the Samaveda. The 3-tone liturgical music gave rise to 5-tone, to 7-tone, 12 semitone, 22 Shrutis. And I show how Pythagoras had used the Sulba Sutras as the ratios for the frequencies and so on and so forth. No time to talk about that. Astronomy, there's a whole lot of things to talk about the roots of astronomy in India and how it spread. Even the roots of modern systems. We are conditioned to think that modern systems is entirely a product of the West and so on. But don't forget that unless you had a mechanism to make your machines talk, you have nothing. Today's modern digital world depends entirely upon the propositional logic. So you have the logic gates and other things that made its way possible because of these two gentlemen, George Boole and De Morgan, very famous name in electrical engineering. However, you find that Colebrook, he wrote a work on Indian logic in 1824, Chandashastra and Jain works and so on and so forth. This greatly influenced George Boole and De Morgan. And Boole's wife, Mary Everest, she wrote a letter to Jagdish Chandra Bose and said that these two gentlemen were strongly influenced by Indian Vedantic thought in their logic systems. And that is why today we enjoy the fruits of our ancestors who talk about the logic that has made possible digital phones, digital computers, and so on. We didn't invent these things, but then these things run because the logic and the way of thinking was made possible by our ancestors. I had talked to you about knowledge transmission out of India, about people say that Indian knowledge came into India from the Greeks and Babylonians. However, I have up to 6 routes for knowledge transfer. Here is one route between 3000 BC to 300 BC where knowledge went out of India. A second route for knowledge transfer from 300 BC to 1100 BC from Afghanistan all the way to Mediterranean lands. This was a conduit for knowledge. The Silk Route was one more conduit for knowledge. I give the example of the Boer manuscript. No time to talk about that. About the periplus of the Erythraean Sea, all through the Roman era, from the Mediterranean land to the land bridge, Red Sea, going on to the ports in Kerala, Gujarat, and East Coast, there was trade happening with India. I've got a lot of data points that show what data, what knowledge went in these various channels. During the Muslim transmission, 700 current era to 1600 current era, a lot of Indian knowledge was taken from India, went through all the Muslim lands, was injected in Spain, Why Spain? Spain is very important. Southern Spain was Muslim, northern Spain was Christian. Southern Spain, Cordoba was the capital, northern Spain, Toledo was the capital. In Toledo, there was a Christian monastery whose only job was to translate Arabic texts into Latin. And what were those Arabic texts? Those Arabic texts we know from the works of Gerard of Cremona and others, they were translations of Sanskrit works. Sanskrit works like Charaka Samhita, Shushruta Samhita, so many other works were translated into Arabic and Persian, injected into Spain, translated by the Christians into Latin, and formed the basis of the Renaissance itself. That is the route in which knowledge transmissions happened. We have evidence, a lot of church travelers in this time frame, translation schools, I just talked to you about that. Colonialists who directly came to India, the Portuguese, Dutch, French, and British who took knowledge from India. I have a paper on this you might like to take a look at. It's the Waves paper in 2018. About 50 references I have in this paper that talk about it. And very last point, is India an ancient or a recent civilization? I just want to give one example. In Indian Rig Veda, the Shanti mantras, you don't find evidence of people saying, God, make me rich, kill my enemies, let only I do well, let everybody else do badly. You have Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramaya. Let everybody prosper, let everybody be good. Not only everybody, animate, inanimate objects, the entire cosmos. Here is the evidence of a people who are transcended their narrow requirements and are thinking globally of the cosmos itself. And I call this literary evidence of high thinking, very, very high thinking. You don't find this in any part of the world. Any part of the world, God is on their side, chilling my enemies and things of that nature. Not over here. Whether you go into these Upanishads over here, or whether you go into this Mandukya Upanishad and others, Prashna Upanishad, I'm not going to read these things, you find that. So my conclusion today, we have very, very deep knowledge systems, very high accomplishment in a wide range of fields, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, grammar, arts, architecture, evidence of highly cultured people from ancient times, pan-India evidence of cultural similarity, evidence of knowledge transmission to the world. Archaeology, we collaborates antiquity scene in astronomy. Today in Birana, you got archaeology going back to 9,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago. It is within the range of astronomy. 20 years ago, if I had gone and said that astronomy is talking about 8,000 BC, 7,000 BC, people will laugh at me saying, where is archaeology for that? But today in Birana, it has come within the range of astronomy. So antiquity plus knowledge systems plus transmission plus high thinking, I'm saying is evidence of an ancient culture. So I've come to the end of the talk where I've struck out all these things that I started in the mainstream, and I'm saying that the evidence is showing these things over here. Evidence-based narration helps us to validate ideas and claims, and that is the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Thank you.
మా వేకప్ ఇండియా .tv లేటెస్ట్ అప్డేట్స్ ముందుగా మీకు రావాలనుకుంటే సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేసుకోండి. అలాగే పక్కనున్న బెల్ ఐకాన్ ను క్లిక్ చేస్తే ఆల్, పర్సనలైజ్డ్, నన్ అనే ఆప్షన్స్ వస్తాయి. అందులో ఆల్ అనే ఆప్షన్ పై క్లిక్ చేయండి.